Okay, welcome, my friends, to the next episode here in the Red Delta Project podcast and live feed Q&A, where we take a fundamental approach to diet and exercise to make this whole fitness thing a lot simpler, easier, and a lot more effective. As always, I'm Matt Schifferly. Today's episode is sponsored by my brand new push-pull squat approach to strength training, one of the most direct and simplest ways to build muscle and strength without a lot of wasted time and energy. PDFs are available. Link is down below in the description. Seriously, it's the best $5 you'll spend all year. And speaking about all year, this is a continuation off of the episode last week. We're talking about getting our ducks in a row in order to maximize your chances of getting what you want in this year. And this is going to be applied much more to just fitness. This is making more money, having better relationships, building a better ship in a bottle. You can apply these tips to lots of different applications in life, but of course it's going to be done in a fitness context because that's what we deal with here. And of course, as always, I'll be taking your live questions and stuff here on the live feed Q&A. So I'll try to get to as many as I possibly can. Wasatch Wizard is already in the house. Leo, it's always good to see you, my friends. All right. So first tip. The biggest lesson that I could probably give you, and I give this to a lot of people, but nobody ever wants to hear it when it comes to making change happen, is first getting the mindset that you don't need to work so hard at it. Because there's this interesting paradox about change. On one hand, change can be hard. We all know this, right? We've all had difficulty in life, friction that comes about trying to make changes happen. But on the other hand, we also understand that the only constant in life is change, that it's going to happen no matter what. I guarantee you, by this time next year, or hell, even in 6 months from now, you're going to be in a different place in life. Somehow your body's going to be different. Your life is going to be different, maybe in some small ways, maybe some very big ways, right? I've been going through some friction and some stuff over the past couple of weeks. And I was just thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, this situation was so radically different in the middle of summer. Like the people I was associating with and the relationships I had with them, so wildly different. It's amazing how that stuff changes. And yet when we look at our lives sometimes in a very acute approach, we feel like, well, this is just how it's always going to be. We're always going to be in this situation, whether it's good or bad. So we have to recognize that when it comes to monitoring change, we don't actually make change happen. We're more just directing the direction we want it to go in. It's not something we have to like force and make it happen through blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of effort. That's not to say it's always going to be totally easy, but you're going to change. Your situation that you're in is guaranteed to change, probably faster than you think. So when we adopt different habits and different approaches, we're not making change happen. We're just simply directing where we want that change to go. And so we don't need to feel like we're forcing it so hard. And the second lesson is recognizing that the best ways to direct the changes we want, especially in our health and fitness, is to use the simplest and most manageable habits possible. And this is very, very, again, a little thing that a lot of people don't like. When people ask me, like, how do I eat better? I usually give them my 3P strategy. Every meal, you mind your 3Ps. Do you have a plant-based food source? Do you have protein? And are you managing your portions according to weight management goals and eating enough to satisfy and that sort of thing? And that right there, just that, will probably handle and take care of the bulk of what anybody needs as far as their diet goes. Everything else is just preference of what foods you're eating and how you're managing that sort of thing. But if you get those 3Ps managed with most every meal that you eat, your diet's probably about 80% of whatever it needs to be for you to reach your goals. Just that. But many people are not receptive to it because there's a lot of attention out there paid towards what's fancy, what seems extreme, what seems like really out of step with the norm. I mean, gosh, the number of times people ask me about these weird cockamamie fad diets and stuff. And the bottom line is, I usually tell people that, like, what do you think of carnivore? What do you think about this diet, that diet? 9 times out of 10, I give them the same answer. It's not necessary. It's completely unnecessary. And remember, there's only 2 reasons why you should adopt any diet and exercise habit in our fitness culture. It's either desired or acquired. And 99.9% of the time, it's never going to be required, a particular method, unless your goal is to use that particular method. But when your goals are, I want to lose weight, I want to build muscle, I want to be healthier and stuff, there's no particular method you have to follow to do that, because your results do not come from the diet you follow. They don't come from what kind of workout program you do. They come from how well you can influence the fundamental processes of mother and human nature. That's what determines your results. I don't care what diet you follow. It's honestly not that important. It really isn't. So we need to base much more of our habits on just, what do you want to do? What do you fit into your schedule and your resources and your preferences? That's the stuff that's most important. And 9 times out of 10, the simplest, most basic fundamental habits, like my push-pull squat program, are the stuff that's going to produce the best results in spades. But again, we get called into and really lured into, oh, this one weird trick, or what are these celebrities doing, or what is this crazy thing? I had a marketer one time tell us in a seminar, he's like, you don't need to make an effective diet or workout program to make a lot of money. He's like, the effectiveness is almost arbitrary. It's like, it doesn't really matter. If you want to make it sell very well, make it crazy and different. It's like, you could make anything up, make any sort of cockamamie thing up. All it's got to be is really different from what is the norm out there. So if you have YouTube videos and in social media posts and sales copy of how weird and crazy this thing is, that's going to get a lot more attention, and people are probably going to be buying it much more. Regardless, you don't even need scientific validity about the darn thing. It doesn't need to have any validity whatsoever. It just needs to be different, because a lot of us are just looking for different. We're just looking for something out of step from the norm. But most of the time, that sort of stuff is going to be just weird and not nearly as effective, because it's hard to maintain. And it's usually a pretty weak influence towards those fundamental processes that are going to get you what you want. So it's very attention grabbing, but it's really not that great. But things like my 3P strategy are stuff that are boring. They're mundane. They don't require anything special. They don't require an identity. They're nothing funky or crazy and stuff. And that's exactly why they work. I always use the example that when I used to work at one of the biggest gyms here in Denver, Colorado, we had over 1,000 people a day come into our gym. We had over 30 trainers and coaches on staff at all times. And when I would get questions about this weird program or this weird diet and stuff like that, sometimes I'd tell them, it's like, all these people on staff, all these coaches, various disciplines, various levels of experience, nobody does any of that stuff. None of it. I think we had one guy who didn't eat like dairy because he was lactose intolerant, but all the weird cockamamie diet and exercise programs, none of us did any of that stuff at all, largely because we're in the know. It's our business to understand what works best in fitness. And if none of us are doing any of that, what does that kind of tell you? Instead, we all kind of have our own thing, but they're all boring habits. They're boring exercises. They're boring workout programs, boring in quotes. Nothing is fancy that we do, but it works because we can progress it and we can stick to it. And that's the stuff that's going to work the best, the very simple stuff. Let me see if I can get to some questions here. Again, if you put a "Hey, Matt" in the comment section, I know that's a question directed to me, because you all are very supportive. You got each other's backs, and I always appreciate the RDP community. It's very strong. So I know not to address something if it doesn't have a "Hi, Matt" in the subject line. But Ryan K is coming on. "Hey, Matt, linear progression versus periodization. What are your thoughts?" Very good. Okay, so two questions here, really. Linear progression, it's a myth. It's very much a concept that we think, okay, I should be making progress in a very nice, steady state. A lot of programs, a lot of books out there and stuff are like, oh yeah, you should be losing, 2 pounds a week, or you should be adding 5 pounds of weight to the bar every week or 2 weeks or something. Like, you should make progress in a reliable, consistent way. And maybe that could happen for a short term, especially when you're starting out, but it almost never works out that way. I don't know a single human being that accomplished anything major and substantial with consistent linear progression over time. It's never happened. as far as I know, right? Because progress is always kind of this jumbled up sort of approach. And a lot of times, progress is going to come from focusing on different things. I was in a very long email conversation this past week about using more of an attention to subjective variables in workouts for making progress. Like, yeah, okay, you want to add weight, add reps, all that, good. But that's like 1% of what's responsible for your progress, especially as you get more advanced in your training, because it's going to come down to how good is your technique? What's your speed and tempo? What's your body position? How's your breathing? What's going on with your muscle activation? How do you feel the muscles transforming and activating during an exercise? How is it different from one rep to the other? How's it different from one set to the other? Is there discrepancy between your right and left side? How are you applying force into the tool that you're using or the floor? These are all questions that we can still make progress with, even if you never make any changes to your weight and reps at all. That's why I usually like to recommend, like I call freeze workouts. Like, okay, for the next month, you're not allowed to change any quantifiable metrics in your workout. You're going to do the same exercise, same weight, same repetitions. Everything's exactly the same. You're not allowed to change anything about it, but you still have to make progress. How? By doing the darn things better. And that's usually where a lot of people make their progress, but it's not going to be this linear staircase of progression. It's going to be making progress as you can. For example, you could say, I'm trying to keep my chest up to my hands for the pull-ups to make sure I'm getting those shoulders down and back. How long is that going to take you? You could be able to successfully accomplish that in a week, or it could take you all summer or winter. Now it's winter to make that happen, right? There's no such thing as a reliable, consistent, normal way of making progress for anybody. It's going to happen on its own pace. So progress as and where you can, and don't worry about, well, it should be happening at this pace. Life doesn't go according to plan for anybody. So this idea of how much linear progress we should be making is just kind of a general guide, but not at all something you should adhere to, because you're probably not going to. Sometimes you're going to progress a lot faster. Sometimes it's going to be slower. Sometimes you're going to progress in just very radically different ways. And then coming up on periodization, all periodization is making sure that you're having a focus and attention to create an emphasis in something that's important for your progress. Okay? It's not at all, again, necessary for most people, but we do want to have some attention towards, okay, now you're going to put more emphasis on focusing on whatever that is. And it's always going to be different for every goal, and the blocks are going to be different for every person and stuff. But the bottom line, it really doesn't matter how you go about it. It just matters that at this point, I'm focusing on building strength. At this point, I'm focusing on improving technique. At this point, I'm focusing on a better sidekick, whatever the kind of thing is. It's just a way of creating an emphasis in your workouts on what you're focusing on, rather than just saying, I just do a whole bunch of stuff and just hope for the best. So it's, again, largely personalized. It's something that a lot of people think, okay, there's some magic formula out there and stuff. There's not. It's like, as long as you're telling me, it's like, well, I focus on this aspect of my workout for either an hour, because you can have multiple things you're focusing on in the same workout, like my push-pull-squat program does, or grind style calisthenics, or you could do workout to workout, or week to week, or month to month. Sometimes athletes will do it from like preseason, in season, post-season, off-season kind of stuff. But it's just a way of making sure that you're focusing on various things, if you even need to at all, right? If you have more general goals in fitness, it's probably not necessary in the slightest, because you don't need an emphasis on any one thing. So periodization could be a way to just make training interesting. It can give you something to look forward to, like, okay, now I'm on my strength training block, or now I'm on my power block, or whatever. So it can be fun, but it's not something that's going to be like, oh, wow, that made such a difference in my training. It often is not. It's like, yeah, I just kind of work on different things in a planned way rather than just random. So I like it. It's just make sure there's a purpose behind it. Max is saying, hey, Matt, this last 2022, I struggled a lot with paralysis by analysis. Yes, when it comes to training, do you have any advice to get over this? Very good question. So here's the thing to really understand about paralysis by analysis. Most of it's just noise trying to get you to convince you that you should be doing something a certain way. And the vast majority of it really isn't that important at all. Again, this is the power that comes from a fundamental approach to fitness, because there's a million different ways you can approach diet. There's a million different ways you can approach your workouts and what exercise you do and how you're programming and stuff. For the vast majority of us, none of it's going to matter very much. Seriously. It's like, should I do X or Z? I don't know. It probably isn't going to matter. So a lot of times when it does matter, we can find out very quickly one of two ways. One is recognizing, is X or Z going to be a bigger influence on a fundamental process for my goals? Is it going to make a big difference on either my intake or my expenditure from a nutrition standpoint? Or how is it going to change the stimulus that I'm trying to create in my workout? If it's going to really matter, it should be extremely obvious right from the get-go. It's like, okay, if I went from doing this exercise to that exercise, will that help me build bigger biceps? You shouldn't even have to question it, because it's like, yeah, dude, like I'm doing this hardcore bicep exercise that makes my biceps feel like they're going to explode. Is that going to make a difference? Well, yeah, of course it is. It should be extremely obvious if it really matters. And if it's not obvious, it probably doesn't matter very much. And if you are really on the fence about such things, the best way to figure it out is to give it a shot. Yeah, there's a lot of people out there on the internet, myself included, who have very strong opinions about what is the best way to do things, what the best diet is, and what the best approach is and stuff like that. And you know what? 90% of our opinions are worth about as much as a pile of dog crap, because we're not you. We're not the ones applying the information. All we're doing is giving you the ideas from our own experience. But who cares? My experience isn't going to get you in shape. It's not going to help you build muscle. So it's really not worth anything other than, here's an idea. What do you think of that? And again, people will say, what do you think of this program? What do you think of that program? To hell with what I think about it. It's really not that important. Everything that matters is what you think about it. And if you're like, I don't know, it could be, I don't know, then you give it a shot. And again, it should be fairly obvious if it is important. Like when I started my training with overcoming isometrics, I was like, I don't know, could be this, that, nor does it. Now I could go online and research in quotes for ages and probably just get more paralysis by analysis. But instead I just grabbed a bed sheet, put some handles on it, and I'm like, I'm just going to give this a try. And within 48 hours, I was like, holy hell, this stuff is great. Wow, this makes such a big difference. That's all the information you need. And when I started to, put out my book on overcoming isometrics and making programs about it on YouTube and stuff, I got lots of people giving me their opinions, whether it's great or whether it's bad. Does it matter? No, because all that matters to me is my own experience. And when I grab onto my handles and I feel my muscles light up like the 4th of July, that's all I need to know, because that's all that really matters. So paralysis by analysis, ironically enough, is usually an emotional drive because we're trying to figure out what we should do. And a lot of times when there's information out there online and coaches and experts, what they're trying to do is emotionally manipulate you so that you hold their same beliefs. I believe this about isometrics. I believe this about this diet and stuff like that. To hell with all that stuff, because my beliefs don't matter. Yours do, for your actions, because your beliefs are the ones that are going to lead you to taking those actions. Now, of course, I have a strong opinion about overcoming isometrics, but it doesn't really matter for you, because you could be like, I hate it. It's the dumbest thing ever. Okay, great. That's what you should base things off of. That's what you should go off of, is your own experience. And when you come across paralysis by analysis, there's this lure out there saying, like, eventually you're going to figure it out. Eventually you're going to have a clear answer. It'll never happen. The more information you put in, the worse off it's going to be. It's kind of like trying to dig yourself out of a hole. The further you dig, the deeper you're going to get, and you're not going to be able to get out. So don't worry about it. The internet's not there to tell you what you should do. You're supposed to figure that out for yourself. The internet's just there for information and ideas. That's all it can provide for you. My books, my YouTube videos, all I can do is give you some ideas. But honestly, there's no way in hell I'm going to know what you should honestly be doing, because you're the only person in the world who can figure that out for yourself. Okay, I'm getting a little off track here. We're talking about simple tips for transformation in 2023. The next tip that I would strongly advise, because we're talking about simple ideas, simple actions and habits, is live well within your means. And this is more than financial advice. This is also time and energy and effort. See, there's a lot of stuff out there that's all about optimizing and maximizing things. But here's the thing that no one's ever going to tell you is that optimized and maximizing anything is not sustainable. You simply can't do that. It's what I often call Everest goals in fitness. Your absolute best physique, or the amount of muscle or strength you can have, or the fastest you can run, the absolute best you can possibly achieve is simply not something you can keep. It's not something you're going to be able to maintain because it's so resource intensive and it takes so much effort and so much work that it's not a practical thing. It's like a mint condition antique Ferrari. You can have that, but you're not going to be able to really live with it for very long. And you just, like the car in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you just kind of let it sit there on a shelf. But unfortunately, your body's not something you can put into storage. You have to interact with it every day in real life. So when we're looking at optimizing and maximizing and getting the best possible results, no, that's fine and good. But like climbing Mount Everest, you can get there, but you can't stay there. But instead, remember that you're not going to get results by maximizing anything. Maximal diet, optimal workout program and stuff, that doesn't get results. What gets results is creating a delta from one workout to the next. What's different? What's improved? What's better? And could you always go beyond that? Sure, absolutely. But when we focus too much on what's optimal, 9 times out of 10, this is just an illusion. I know I'm saying that a lot. I don't really know why, excuse it. But most of the time, it's just an illusion because they're like, this is the optimal number of sets. This is the optimal workout. This is the optimal diet. Complete illusion, because optimal is not going to be a set fixed point on what your habits are. It's always going to be evolving and changing and modifying. So whenever we get stuck into this is the optimal best way to do something, we're limiting ourselves greatly because you're stuck. You're like 5 sets is optimal. Well, sometimes you should do more than 5 sets. Sometimes you should do less. And if you don't understand what those times are, you're always going to do 5 sets and you're either going to be over or under, and chances are it's not going to be optimal most of the time. So when we're living within our means, what that means is you're basically using a good amount of time and energy and effort and money and all these other sorts of things, but you're not trying to overextend yourself. And the biggest killer for making change happen is just overexerting yourself, overdoing it, overinvesting in your diet and your habits and other things that are just simply not maintainable. But if you have like an hour-long lunch break and you're just like, okay, I'm going to work out for 40 minutes, then that's a lot easier to maintain. And you can certainly have a good workout there. And people could be like, well, won't you get better results if you work out for an hour? Maybe a little bit at first. But if you're always stressing out about it and you can't quite get your workout in sometimes because you have to cut your lunch period short, no, it's not going to be a better result. It's going to be harder to maintain. And anything that's harder to maintain is going to compromise your results. All right. So the next tip here is progression over optimization. I already covered that one. Excuse me. I'm looking at my list here I wrote on the wall. The next big thing I would say is don't be afraid to modify whatever plans you're on. Okay, think of a good diet or workout program as a general template to get started with. It's not direct marching orders that you have to stick to like glue and get every single detail perfectly right all the time, because your results do not come from how well you follow the plan, especially if that plan is just something you picked up on the internet or found in a book somewhere. Instead, you want to look at it as a template and then change and modify the template however you see fit in order to accommodate your goals, your preferences, and your resources. I get emails and questions from people all the time. I'm doing this program, I'm doing that diet and stuff, but I feel like I might be better off if I make this change or modification. And almost always I'll be like, yeah, go for it. Change it up. And sometimes the plan is like, well, no, you have to do it this way. You can't incorporate that sort of stuff. Well, who the hell says? Remember that fitness is entirely open source. Nobody's in charge of this stuff. Nobody's the authority on what you should be doing and how you should be doing it except you. So whenever you're looking at, okay, this plan is good, but I don't like this exercise and I don't really dig this part and should I modify this and stuff? Almost always the answer is yes, definitely make those changes, because it's the modification of those templates that's probably going to get it more bespoke, more customized into what you actually need. Because the diet or the workout program or the approaches that you really do need just simply do not exist yet. You're not going to get them from a cookie cutter program that you find online or on the internet. So take it as a starting place, but full-heartedly endorse you changing it in any way, shape, and form that you see fit. Excuse me, I drink some more water here. Don't be afraid to modify those programs. All right. Trizzy BTW asking, hey, Matt, is it hard to gain body fat? I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure what you're saying. At age 13. So remember that your ability to gain and lose either fat or muscle is largely down to kind of body type and genetics. So sometimes people are like, dude, I'm a hard gainer. I'm like, well, yeah, almost everybody is. Building muscle is really hard. And yes, there are some people who are genetic freaks who can build muscle much easier than others, but that's how fitness just works in general. You're always going to have people who are like, yes, it's easier for me to lose fat and stay lean. I'm one of them. I fully admit that. It's just easier for me to be lean. And other people, it's going to be a lot harder. Fitness isn't fair. Remember, it's balanced. There's no such thing as fairness in fitness. Some things are going to be easier. Some things are going to be harder. Now, you did mention, and I really appreciate this, your age of 13. And at that age, like your body is just getting geared up into adolescence and puberty. And your body's going to be changing like crazy during this time. And one, I highly commend you for getting into the fitness thing at that age, because a lot of people don't. But the recommendations and how the body's supposed to be changing, and the rate of change and what you should be doing and stuff, all bets are off at this age. One, you're just simply, in many cases, far too young to have a lot of reliable change in the body. And as you get more advanced in age into your teenage years, I mean, you're going to find way big differences in one individual to another. Because when you're much younger, like people are all kind of very similar to one another, and then hormones kick in and adolescence and stuff. And you're going to find some people, they change a lot more. There's kids in high school who can bench press 300 pounds. There's other kids who will struggle to do a single push-up. There's such huge discrepancies between people. So the point of your habits at this stage in your life is just building habits. Have no expectations about what your body's going to do just yet, because you can't have any expectations right now. Maybe some things are going to be easier. Maybe some things are going to be harder. It's impossible to say right now. And it's probably going to change a lot over the next 10 years of your life. Between 13 and 23, your body's going to change in ways you can't possibly imagine right now. Nobody can. Nobody knows what's going to be happening. There are people I've known who started strength training, and they're like, yeah, I trained from like 13 to like 20 years of age, 22 or so. And I put on like 5 pounds of muscle, and then just something shifts in their body when they get out of adolescence or in the mid 20s. And suddenly it's like, dude, I put on 10 pounds of muscle in 6 months. I didn't do anything different. It's like, yeah, because your body changed again. So at that stage, don't have any expectations. It's just simply unfeasible to know reliably what your body's going to be able to do and how it's going to change. All right, so he follows up again. Is it worth lifting then? Absolutely, for sure. Absolutely. Because remember that the benefits of lifting are far beyond just building muscle and strength. And granted, technically, every body will build muscle and strength to some degree. I had someone the other day say, like, I've been working out for 5 years and never got anything from it. Like, I guarantee you something happened. It's impossible to not have adaptation to any stimulus you create. So I guarantee something's going to happen. If nothing else, you're building technique, you're building discipline, you're building familiarity with the exercises. I mean, so many people, myself included, like, I didn't start seriously working out and lifting until I was almost 30, and a lot of these people online, they're like, oh yeah, I'm in great shape. It's like, when did you start working out? 9. When I was 12, my uncle showed me how to deadlift and, snatch when I was, 15 years old. It's like, oh man, I wish so bad I got that earliest start, because the body that you're developing through your natural growth process evolves around and develops around whatever stimulus you're feeding it right now. So even if, let's say this scenario happens, let's say you start lifting and you don't build any conceivable muscle for the next 10 years, not an ounce, your body doesn't change at all, but your tendons are building strength, you're building coordination, your muscle activation is going good and stuff like that. You don't build a gram of muscle for the next 10 years. I guarantee you, you're still building that foundation that is going to be worth more than anything out there, because that foundation, let's say you hit 25 and bang, you're off to the races. And that's how you get to be like 27 and you're jacked and everybody's like, dude, that's amazing. How did you do it? It's like, yeah, I started lifting when I was 13. It's like, that's how I did it. It wasn't what you did in the past 6 months or 2 years. It's what you started doing for 10 years before. So yes, of course, there's a lot of benefit to lifting. I can't think of a single scenario where I would tell someone they shouldn't be lifting to at least some degree. For sure. All right. Let's see what else we can address here. Trizzy is following up. One more question. Say, I stop lifting, will I lose that after I build it, lose the muscle after I build it? You may. You very well may. You don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. But the thing to also consider is that once you've built muscle and you lose it for whatever reason, let's say you have an injury and you just can't work your legs for 6 months or whatever, you get back to it and it builds back real fast. It builds back a lot quicker. And again, that also is very much influenced by your history, your training history. Your training history is one of the biggest, most influential impacts towards your potential for success. And right now you're young enough that you don't have much of a training history, but you're starting to build it now. So by the time you're done with high school or you're in college and stuff, having that training history is huge, because there's going to be peers that who are like, I'm trying to build muscle and it's not working. It's like, how long have you been training? Oh, 6 months. It's like, dude, that's nothing. 6 months is barely anything, but you've been training for, at that point, over a decade. That's massive. So even if you're like, okay, I'm going to, totally party all semester, freshman year and stuff, and I lose all the strength and muscle, fine, great. But then you get the lifting bug again, you're going to build it back real fast. All right, Esteban, excuse me. Boy, I need my reading glasses. Esteban Cruz, do you think that in the past few years, you make progress in terms of gaining muscle mass? I ask because you look relatively the same the past few years. Yes, absolutely. And here's the reality that a lot of people don't want to recognize, is that your potential for physique development, especially muscle and stuff, most of that is achieved in the first 3 to 5 years of a train career. If you're training hard, if you're consistent with it and stuff like that. This idea of like, okay, you make a big change, and you build some muscle and stuff, and then every 5 years and stuff, like, no, that's not how it's going to work. If you train for, let's say, 30 years, most of your development is going to happen in the first 5 years, and the next 25 years, you're pretty much going to be about roughly, give or take, the same. And it's not to discourage anybody, but it's just simply the way the body works. This applies across a lot of other things too, where, there's the potential to improve. Now, of course, there's always the potential to keep improving. I know it doesn't look like it, but my body is very different than it was 5 years ago. I had to take a bunch of shirts to Goodwill last summer because they didn't fit anymore. My shoulders are getting broader. Plus, it's not even just physique development, but I'm way stronger. I don't have any shoulder pain anymore. I don't have any more back pain anymore. I'm getting higher in the bridges. I'm getting much stronger in all of my lifts. My Taekwondo isn't a whole lot. Everything is way different than it was even last year as far as the feeling of performance aspects of things. But of course, there's no way you're going to see that on a YouTube video, right? The ability to discern big changes in the physique is very, very hard to see on social media unless, you literally like, I got the lighting just right, and I got the pose just right, and I've got my dehydrate. It's one of these things that of course, you're not going to notice any change. You shouldn't expect to see a big change unless there's a big change in lifestyle, a huge change. The biggest change I ever had which made a very noticeable in my physique, was when I literally went from, I want to be as skinny as humanly possible and light as possible when I was a bike racer in college, and I weighed 150 pounds. And I was like, I want as little muscle as possible. And then literally a year later, I started lifting. I was like, okay, now I want to build muscle. And I did 180 degrees. And the difference, that's the thumbnail for today's episode, the difference between those. And it was night and day. People are like, oh my gosh, it's such a difference. Yeah, with that big a change, it's going to happen. But I'm not going to have a change like that for almost anything I do in the conceivable future. So would my physique have a very big difference? Of course not. Why would it? It wasn't that big of a difference in the stimulus. So when you have, again, the expectation of our fitness culture is you should have this big transformation happening. Yeah, when you're a beginner, most of the information regarding, like, again, the linear progression models and how much weight should you lose, almost all of that has to do with beginners. Our fitness culture is geared towards beginners. Almost nothing out there is about, you've been lifting for 30 years, here's what you can expect. I used to have a boss who was a physique competitor. It was his business to transform his body as much as humanly possible and optimize his physique. And he was starting to get ready for a show that was happening in the future. And he was telling me about his diet and his workout. He's like, I'm going to radically change this. I'm changing this. I'm changing this. And I was like, oh my gosh, dude, it's like, this is going to be your life. And he's like, yeah. And if I really get my diet down, and if I really build it, my workouts, and I'm consistent, and I don't get sick, and I don't get injured, and I get everything going, I'm hoping that in the next 8 months or so, I might conceivably, possibly, if the stars align, build 2 pounds of muscle. And it was like, yeah, that'd be great for you, because he was at that point. When I started lifting, building 10 pounds of muscle was easy. But as you get more advanced, there's no way, unless you're on steroids or something like that. It just doesn't happen, because you've used up most of your potential. And I know we don't like to admit it, but if you have a lifelong training career, you're going to spend most of your life not experiencing big changes in how your body looks, feels, and performs. It's just not going to happen, because that's not how the body can adapt. If it was, you would literally go from being a novice in a sport to a world champion within a decade. Everybody would do that. Everybody would achieve world-class level physique and performance within like 5 or 6 years, if that was the case. So again, this is our perception that is not based on truth. It's not based in reality. In fact, it's based on marketing. It's based on the idea that the body can change more reliably and a lot faster than it usually does. And that's not to discourage folks, because don't underestimate just a little bit of change and the way it can radically alter you. All right, more tips. So the other thing is, I get questions a lot about changing, like, when should I change things up? And my answer to that is change as needed. There's a lot of, especially with periodization plans and stuff out there, there's this idea of, this is when you make changes to your diet. This is when you make changes to your workouts and stuff. And yeah, planning out changes can be a very good thing. But it's much more practical to just say, when you need to make a change, just change it. If you're using a workout or a diet or something, and you're running against some sort of friction, you're like, I don't know if this is quite the right thing I should be doing, or, I think about making this change and stuff. Don't wait until you complete a cycle or some sort of a phase or something. It's like, okay, now I can make this change. Just make it. Just do it. Change your workout every 4 to 6 weeks. Change your diet this way. Change it. If you just want to make a change, just change it. There's no need to put it off. But at the same time, if you don't need to make a change, don't worry about it. It's like, I've been doing this workout this way for the past 6 weeks. And you're like, well, how's it? It's like, I still am making progress. I'm still making gains. I'm feeling good about it. Everything's very satisfying. I'm like, dude, great. Keep going. The number one rule of a good program is don't change the program unless you have to. People all the time, they come to me like, I'm following this diet and I'm losing about a pound a week or so, and I'm getting a little bit stronger every workout, and it's feeling pretty good and everything. So I'm going to change it and try and do this cockamamie thing I found online. It's like, dude, why? You just went from something that was reliably working for you, and you are enjoying it and it's satisfying, to something that you're just going to roll the dice and just cross your fingers and hope it's going to work. But again, a lot of that information is just hype out there. People spouting the opinion, this is the best thing ever. You're missing out if you're not doing this workout program and all this other, FOMO kind of nonsense. And people change things up when they don't have to. If something's working on a regular basis, which almost never happens, then stick with it. I had a guy one time, he came up to me and he was frustrated because he's like, I've been losing on average about 1.3 pounds a week for the past, it was some great amount of time, it was like 7 months or so. And he's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know what's happening. I don't know, why do I need, and I was like, wait, let me get this straight. You're losing on average a little over a pound a week, and you've been doing that for 7 months? And he's like, yeah, so what am I doing wrong? I'm like, nothing, dude, go buy a lottery ticket. Oh my gosh, like that almost never happens. Consistent progress over 7 months? That's so rare, dude. You have no idea how great you're going right now. But again, a lot of the messages in our fitness culture are like, you should be expecting more, and look at this radical before and after pictures and all these other sorts of things. And slow baby step progress on a consistent basis is so rare because most people never make that kind of progress. It's very, very rare. So appreciate that sort of stuff when it does happen, but change as needed. If you don't need to change, don't. Do keep progressing though. Do keep looking for progress and progression. You should still be looking for small little subtle ways you're improving on a week-to-week or month-to-month basis. Joseph Bello is asking, hey Matt, my problem is trying to gain weight. I'm 53, sorry, not 5'3", 53. I started bodyweight training 2.5 years. I need to find more difficult exercises. I can only do 10 or 12 reps or so I can put 10 pounds on. Okay, so remember, your workout is a very important influence in your ability to build muscle, but it is a relatively tiny influence towards that. I always use the analogy of, think of like you want to build a big bonfire, and you've got logs and you've got wooden pallets and you've got gasoline and you've got all this stuff to build it. What is your workout going to do? It's just lighting the match. That's all your workout does, is it's the spark for that fire. That's all it provides. So when it comes to our workouts, we want to make sure that we can progressively work our muscles hard. And when it comes to especially building muscle, we want time and tension. So we want to build strength, and to some degree, we want to build some degree of endurance as well. So there's a number of things to always address with this. One is just make sure you're getting your muscles engaged well to begin with. So when you're doing your exercise, you should feel like your muscles are burning like the sun on 4th of July. You should feel the muscle. I don't care how many push-ups you do. I don't care if you can do a one-arm push-up and stuff. I want you to do your workout and be like, how does your chest feel? I'm like, dude, I feel like my chest is going to explode. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's agony. Good. That should happen every single time. If that's not, and you're like, yeah, okay, I just feel a little pumpy. Okay, that feels pretty good and stuff. No, it's like trying to start that bonfire, just rubbing two sticks together slowly, right? You want to just obliterate the hell out of those muscles. So that's the first thing I would look at, is make sure your mind-muscle connection is dialed in. Make sure that you are engaging muscles extremely hard when you are doing your exercises. You're progressing time and tension, and you're right about the harder exercises too, especially with calisthenics. You want to be doing things that have a relatively low repetition count, but don't be afraid with the higher stuff either. So today I was training a young lady, and I was like, all right, great. Push-ups, you got 20 reps. She kind of looked at me like I had two heads. She's like, 20? I was like, yep, 20. And she got to that point where she was like, oh my God, my legs, they're barely walk kind of thing. It's like, yeah, wonderful. You want to range with things. And again, this goes with the whole optimal thing. It's like, how many reps should you do? A range. You want to range. You want to be like, I'm training really hard. This is a pull-up variation. I'm getting like 3 to 5 repetitions, if that kind of thing. And that's all I can possibly do. I'm training heavy. And other times it's like, okay, I'm going to do these bodyweight rows. I'm going to try and challenge myself and get 30 kind of thing. It's like, I'm going to really just blast the mother living hell out of this sort of thing. So we want a big range. We want good activation. Make sure you're eating plenty. I'm not a, eat big to get big kind of guy because, if you're eating too much, you're just going to get fatter. You cannot stimulate muscle growth with food. Trust me, we've tried. It doesn't happen, but you definitely want to eat plenty. I usually don't recommend people follow any particular kind of like restrictive diets. When people are like, okay, I'm trying to build muscle and I'm a locavore raw vegan. It's like, so what are you just eating carrots? Like, no, don't have those kinds of restrictions if you don't need them. Have a very full diet and don't shy away from the calorically dense foods. And then, and the other thing too is making sure that, it is something that is not fair. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Can everybody build a big muscular physique? Absolutely not. That's like saying everybody can be really good at whatever sport they want. No, it doesn't work that way. Life isn't fair. Fitness isn't fair. Some people are going to struggle to put on 10 pounds of muscle just because that's how they're built, and other people are going to build more because that's how they're built. But you're usually going to find that those individuals have trouble in other ways. I should do another episode on my builder versus burner body types, because it's just the way I've kind of looked at things over the course of my training careers. Some people are builders, some people are burners. Builders are the ones who are going to build muscle and strength a lot easier, but they're probably going to be carrying more body fat throughout their life. And it's going to be hell for them to get lean. 6-pack abs just ain't happening for them. And then burners on the other side of the scale, where you're going to have a hell of a time building any muscle. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's always going to be hard. It's always going to be very difficult. But staying lean is going to be, a lot easier for you. And everybody's on that spectrum to some degree. Some people are going to be more on one side than the other. Typically, the people who have the best physiques are the ones that are kind of a little bit in the middle, so to speak. But if you're hedging one way toward the other, then yeah, it's going to be, there are just some things that are going to be harder for you to accomplish. And no, there's not a damn thing you can really do about that. You're going to get all the, you're like, okay, this is the type of training you want to do if you're a heart gainer or if you're an ectomorph. And like, no, it's just not happening. You can't turn a bulldog into a greyhound and vice versa. Remember, fitness cannot change your body. Okay, diet and exercise cannot change. I know the transformation term was used in the title here, but you cannot change your body. It's physiologically impossible. You can modify it though. You can modify your body. That's what fitness does, is it modifies it. And you can modify it to a higher degree, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the body you have is going to stay the body you have with changes and modifications over time, unless you get some really big like interventions like drugs and plastic surgery and things like that coming in. Esteban's coming on again. Hey, Matt, Happy New Year. Just wondering if you have any tips for increasing the number of pull-ups. I reached a plateau recently. Can't seem to progress despite consistent practice. Yeah. And again, that's, welcome to real life. That's how it's going to be. You're going to start your workout program and it's like, okay, pull-ups. I went from 1 to 3, and then I got 8 or 5 and then 8 and then maybe 10 on a good day. And then it just kind of, that's where I'm at for a while. It's like, yeah, that's how it works. That's mostly how it goes. You're going to make a good amount of progress for a certain amount of time, and then you're going to stay at relatively the same level for the rest of your life, unless you go really, really hard and you're like, okay, I'm just going to be a pull-up master. And that's where a lot of periodization comes into play as well. It's like, I'm just going to focus my workouts on primarily getting better at pull-ups for, 6 weeks or something like that. I have a client right now doing exactly that sort of thing. She's like, I'm just struggling with pull-ups. I'm like, all right, most of your workouts now are just pull-ups. You're going to do pull-ups every single workout, and the push and the legs and the abs. That's like, if you're working out for an hour, you're going to put all of the other stuff in 15 minutes, and 45 minutes is nothing but rowing and pulling exercises, just to really hammer that sort of thing. But anyway, I'm getting a little off topic here. I would say the biggest thing that holds people back from pull-ups is the same thing that holds people back from almost any upper body exercise, which is just a lack of scapular movement and stability. So again, we're coming back down to like, have I changed in the past, couple of years? It's like, oh God, for pull-ups, absolutely. Largely because I've gotten much more scapular control. Hence, that's why my back and shoulder issues disappeared. is when you are doing your pull-up and you're getting down, let your scaps come up, but you're still retracted. And then when you pull up, depress your scaps hard, really, really hard. I would also ask, how hard do you feel your lats working for that? Because a lot of people do not have good lat activation at all. And if you don't have good lat activation, then there's nothing that's ever going to bring your pull-ups up. Your pull-ups are always going to suck because your lats are your biggest muscles for a lot of your pull chain exercises. And if it's not really engaging very well, then of course it's always going to be weak because you've got the biggest player largely absent or not really engaging very much. And there's nothing you can do that's going to improve anything until you get those lats online. So that's the other question I would ask is how well are you moving your shoulder blades and how well are you engaging your lats? And turn to overcoming isometrics for getting that to beef back up. I've got tons of videos on the YouTube channel to help you with that. But that's where I would go. Scapular lat activation for most people is very poor, and it's always going to mean very substandard pull-ups. Alicia, how's it going? I meant to ask, can exercise alleviate my loose skin? Probably not. Depends on, of course, where the skin is, and it depends on your muscle building capacity. But a lot of times loose skin is particularly in the core and the abdominal section, and there's just no two ways about it. Abs just don't grow that much. Like I'm a size 33 pant right now. I used to be a size 32 because my abs are thicker than they used to be, largely due to the stretch outs on the ab wheels and the rings and stuff like that. And those are a lot stronger than they've been in the past year or so. So I did build a little bit more muscle in my abs, but is an inch going to really matter that much for loose skin? Probably not. It's probably not going to make that much of a difference. Other areas, maybe if you build up your triceps, but again, we're looking at potential capacity for how much muscle you can build. I would hesitate to say it's going to really matter that much. Loose skin is usually a plastic surgery sort of deal. Getting it trimmed off, removed, that sort of thing. I don't know if there's a way to firm up skin, get it to be tighter, but it depends on how much and stuff like that. But it's usually not going to be addressed with diet and exercise. So I wouldn't put too much attention to that sort of approach just at the moment. I think it's going to be more of a waste of time. Frotan in the house. Good to see you. Hey, Matt, is there another body weight exercise other than pull-ups for training biceps specifically? Because without pull-up bar or rings, bicep curls are the best option I can think of. Yeah, I would say bicep curls for sure. On suspension straps is a good way to go. I'm a big fan of the lateral bicep curl where you're standing sideways. That's a really good way to focus on it. Trying to think of bicep involved other exercises because I know like straight arm strength can typically use a lot of bicep activation, like planches and things like that if you want to get into that. Front levers, skin the cat uses quite a bit of bicep action as well. But again, we're talking, this is something you can hang from. And usually when people are like, okay, I don't have a plate, something I can hang from, what do I do to work my back and biceps? And the answer is always the same. Well, get one. Either build one, find one, or buy one. Because it's just, there's no substitute. If you can't hang or at least have a suspension set up from a door or something like that, there's just no way. It's kind of like, well, my car doesn't have any wheels. Can I be fine if I just drive it without the wheels? I'm like, maybe, kind of. So, but no. Buy one, either get a doorway pull-up bar or a standing pull-up bar or the dynamic pull-up bars and stuff. Find one like local playgrounds, or make one. Like a lot of the DIY projects I have on the YouTube channel are all about how to make a pull-up setup, like something you can suspend from a sturdy tree limb or something like that. Costs you like $10. Just a single length of rope and a couple of PVC handles is all you need in order to make that sort of thing happen. But definitely make it happen if possible. All right, let's see. Well, good. Everybody's talking to each other. Very, very good. Good question here is Esteban saying, how do I know if I'm engaging my lats? Not sure how to go about improving this. Yeah. So here's the thing. A lot of things in fitness, like I said earlier, should be extremely self-evident. is like someone once said, "How do I know if this is a spicy chili?" It's like, you'll know. Trust me, you'll know. Your lat activation, same kind of deal. It's like, how do I know if my lats are engaging? If you're questioning, then the answer is no. Then no, they're not, because they should be like, oh, got it. Yeah, very engaged. So that's the thing. It's mind muscle connection is a real thing, folks. It's not bro science in the slightest. In fact, it's fundamentally how your neuromuscular system works. If it's not a real thing, then you wouldn't be able to operate your muscles at all. It is the element that makes everything in training possible. So when we are trying to engage a muscle better, overcoming isometrics works extremely well for that. But also it helps to have a working knowledge of basic human anatomy as well. Because if our perception of what the muscle looks like and how it works is flawed, then you're going to have a hard time learning how to engage it. So look up the muscles online. What are the insertion and origin points? Where does it originate from? Where is it connected? Particularly like the lats, one of the points it's connected to is the southern coastal ridge of your scapula, because your lats are really strongly involved in scapular depression. So just knowing where the muscle is, because a lot of times, like back in the day, I used to think the lats were these thin bands that go up and down the sides of your back. That's not at all what the lats are like. They're this big, huge sail, like massive muscle that compromises most of the real estate in your entire back. And so we want to be able to visualize it in our minds, see it working. And then for the other thing is we want to engage these muscles all the time, especially when it comes to building a particular muscle. It's like you can look at an exercise and be like, okay, this muscle is worked during this exercise, like the biceps. Like, yeah, okay, bicep curls, works the biceps. Great, awesome, wonderful. But if you really want to have the best chance of building something, you want to use the muscle all the time for everything. Like, I don't care what pull exercise you're doing. Biceps should be going nuts. Farmer carries, straight arm strength, every pulling variation conceivable should be a bicep exercise. So that's especially with the lats, your lats should be involved with everything in your upper body. People tell me all the time, they're like, I'm doing push-ups and I feel it in my lats. I'm like, yes, absolutely. Dips are a lat exercise. Push-ups are a lat exercise. Opening a door, you want to feel the muscle engaging readily all the time, not just in one exercise. Because when we're engaging the muscle more readily, that's going to get that mind-muscle connection a hell of a lot stronger. And that's going to have a much bigger impact over your ability to develop it, both for performance and for size as well. Abraham is saying, don't shrug your shoulders upwards. That will not engage your lats. Absolutely. And seldom engage your traps while pull-ups and rows. You're totally right. I made one my most popular videos I made is totally a stupid clickbaity title, but it was true. It's about doing push-ups so that it's safer on your joints. And I talked about the push-up hunch. I see this all the time. You go into a gym, you could have 100 people doing push-ups, and unless they've been coached on how to do them properly, you'll probably see about 90 of them hunching as they do their push-up, and their shoulders come forward because their lats are not engaging to pull their shoulders down away from their ears, which you definitely want. Not only is that going to get your lats engaged, but it's also going to make your chest work a hell of a lot harder. Development of chest and lats are somewhat synergistic. If you find someone with a weak chest, you're probably also going to find them with weak lats or poor lat activation, and vice versa. So the idea of getting the shoulders down, especially when doing pushing movements, absolutely, 100%. Very good tip there as well. All right, so a couple last little tips just to finishing up. So I talked a little bit on the 3 to 5 time frame. And the 3 to 5, it's kind of an arbitrary number, but it's one that is extremely important to recognize. The first is for adherence. So when we take on new diet and exercise habits, people are like, oh man, this is great, but boy, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. We have to always remember that your success depends not on what's best, but just what can you stick to. So whenever we're test driving a new approach, I always ask people, like, can you stick to this for the next 3 to 5 days? And after 3 to 5 days, can you do it for 3 to 5 weeks? And after that, can you do it for the next 3 to 5 months? And after that, can you do it for the next 3 to 5 years? Now, at each stage of that, the answer had better damn well be, oh yeah, no problem at all. That's easy. If it's not, If you're like, well, if I really try and I really am disciplined and I'm really motivated, no, you're screwed. If that's what it takes for you to keep going, you have no chance. Okay. Because you want things that are relatively easy to maintain. Yeah. Sometimes there's going to be periods where it's like, it's been a little hard this month to get the workouts in because I'm busy at work or whatever. Yeah, that happens. Sure. Of course. But chronically, over the long time, habits should be relatively easy to stick to. It's not supposed to be a struggle. If they are, that means changes need to be made. Okay. The other thing about 3 to 5 is, like I was saying earlier, like 3 to 5 years of consistent, intelligent training is going to yield you most of your potential. And that's important to recognize. There was a gentleman, I don't know his name, but he was on, I think, the Tim Ferriss podcast or something. This was years ago. But he said, yeah, after about 5 years of doing something, he's like, I figure I've pretty much attained as much as I'm going to for the most part. And I kind of move on from there. I think he was talking about playing the guitar. He's like, I practiced the guitar very seriously for about 5 years and I got really good and I really enjoy it. And then after that, I just kind of backed off a little bit and I take like one lesson a week and I practice every once in a while. He's like, I'm a good guitar player. I can play what I want to play. Am I going to become a rock star? Absolutely not. There's no way, because the amount of progress that he had at that 5-year mark, that's about 80% or so of his potential, what he's going to get. Can he get more? Absolutely. But remember that the more potential you try to squeeze out of your body, the more it's going to cost you. Now we're talking about spending a lot more time and a lot more money and so on. So that's why you hear of pro athletes, they have to make a choice at some point in their career, like they're in high school or even college, and they're like, okay, I'm a pretty good hockey player. Now, am I close to making it enough to be a pro? Well, yeah, if you improve your performance by 5%, you can probably be in the NHL. Okay, it's worth the camps. It's worth uprooting my family. It's worth putting on my other lifestyle, my other goals in life on hold, my business, my career, all these other sort of things. Because if I can get that extra 5%, I can make it to the NHL and live my dream. That would be awesome, because he's already got most of his potential covered by the time he was in college. But other people, they're like, yeah, where I am in college, if I put in the time and the energy and the sacrifice, get another 5%, will I make it to the NHL? Nope, not going to happen. Okay, it's not worth it, kind of thing. So after about 3 to 5 years, that's probably about most of what you're going to get. Is it worth it to continue trying to get that last 20%? That's a decision to make for yourself. But there's a great amount of empowerment that comes from realizing, okay, I've got what I can get most of the case, and now I'm going to focus on other things. Like when I was a bike racer in college, I got a lot faster by the time I got out of college. I got way faster and much better as a bike racer. But people are like, are you going to turn pro? I'm like, oh gosh, no, there's not a chance in hell I could even come close to half as fast as those guys. So could I put in the time and the energy and really make a go of it? Absolutely. Would I get faster? For sure. Would it basically be worth it? Absolutely not. So it's always a question of what's worth it, sort of thing. And I got what I can, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying, yeah, that's probably about as much as you're going to get. Because a lot of our fitness perceptions in our fitness culture are very elitist. It's like, screw mediocrity and, elite level fitness and everything like that. But the fact of the matter is, as I was talking in the last episode, is that mediocrity is a very good thing in most cases. Because most of us, when it comes to being healthy, being fit, looking good naked, that sort of thing, even a modest amount of performance, if I can do 30 push-ups and 10 pull-ups, that's mediocre in many cases, but that's far beyond mediocre than the average person. And so that's not going to require making it your lifestyle and all these other sorts of things. And I've had people come up to me and they're like, yeah, I can do X, Y, and Z. It's nothing special, but you know what? That's good enough for what I want out of my body. And now I just do enough to kind of maintain that. And it's great because now I've got all this other time and energy and focus I can devote to other things that are frankly much more important. So what I'm saying is that the cost is not always worth it. You can always get more out of your body, but is it going to make that much difference in your health and your quality of life? And I would argue in many cases, no, it's not going to make that much difference. So it's probably not worth that extra little bit. All right, last couple of questions before we to sign off for the day here, Esteban saying, people talk a lot nowadays about the importance of discipline versus motivation. I remember hearing you speak about the importance of motivation. I agree. Any tips on how to work on motivation? Very good question. And that actually dovetails with exactly what I was talking about. Because remember, our motivation is always down to the cost to benefit ratio. It's your subconscious, your emotional subconscious, always analyzing what are you doing and what are you getting out of that thing versus what are the costs associated with doing it. So case in point, this podcast, right? Making this podcast and doing this live feed right here. Now, I don't really make much of anything from it financially. I don't get a whole lot of other compensation from doing this sort of thing. But this is the fastest hour of my entire week. I love doing this. I love talking with you folks. I love answering your questions. I love testing out new ideas. Yeah, you're all my guinea pigs and stuff like that. I love doing this. It's fun for me. That's it. So my perceived benefit of doing this is way high. I really, really like doing this. Now, is there a cost to it? Of course. It's the middle of my Saturday, right? I have equipment that I've had to pay for that, of course, I use for other things, but it's not free as far as the equipment goes. I use a streaming service that I pay a monthly fee for. I have to put in another hour or so of editing and getting the audio podcast up on the directories after this. So this typically takes about 3 hours out of my Saturday to do. So right now, my subconscious is saying, okay, 3 hours out of your Saturday, it costs you all this money and equipment to do it. It costs you all this time and effort. Okay, that's a bad thing. Is it worth it? And then I consider what I'm getting out of it. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, it's worth it. This is awesome. This is great. So I'm motivated to do it, of course. But when we lose motivation, that's because the perceived cost is higher than the perceived benefit. Okay. So whenever we're trying to improve motivation, it's not about watching speeches or videos and rah-rah music and stuff like that. It's just simply tipping that scale. It's about saying, okay, how do we cut down the cost and how do we get the perceived benefit up? That's all it takes. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, but that's how you increase motivation. And people are like, motivation is this murky, amorphic thing that comes. No, it's not. It's a very simple process, and it's something we can most certainly cultivate and maintain and improve because that's all it is. It's cost to benefit ratio. So looking at your diet, your workout programs, and all these other sorts of things, where can you decrease perceived costs? Right? Shorter workouts are a good example of that. If your workout is 3 hours and you don't feel like you're getting much out of it, of course you're not going to be motivated to do that. Nor should you be. It'd be foolish to force yourself to do that sort of thing. But if you do like my micro workouts and stuff and you're like, dude, this takes me 10 minutes and I get my pull-ups and my push-ups in, it's a satisfying pump and I can just do it at home and it feels really good. And I'm really enjoying how it's making me feel and look a little bit and all this sorts of thing. It's like, of course you're going to be motivated to do that, right? So it's all about get the costs down. Time, energy, effort, financial costs, decrease it if possible, and then get the perceived benefits up, get them up, do things that carry a lot of perceived benefits. So if I go mountain biking, I have the benefit of burning calories, but I also just love mountain biking. It's also a lot of fun for me. So things that are like how many different ways can you benefit from an activity? And that's how we just basically manipulate our motivation because it is important. You'll never find somebody who's unmotivated doing the thing, at least in the long term. You'll never see an unmotivated person in the gym. Every person who walks through that door has at least enough benefit to doing it that it's worth the cost of getting into the gym. If they don't feel that way, they're just simply not there. It's that simple. Motivation is our emotional fuel. It is driving our behaviors and our habits. And if you don't have it, you're in deep trouble. All right, one more over here. Jerky Warky coming on in. Love seeing you here. Thank you very much. Hey, Matt, long time since I've been able to catch one of these. Yes, live. Not a question. Simply, I'm glad. Retain a lot of what I've learned from your channel in 2022. Happy New Year from England. Thank you very much, my friend. I do sincerely appreciate it. I appreciate everybody coming on, and it's much appreciated, like I said, about why I do this every single week, because believe me, there's not much reason beyond that, but it is certainly worth it with just that as well. So we'll be doing this probably next week. I think I don't think I have a trip coming to, but I'll let you guys know. But as always, hit the Red Delta Project Instagram for the updates on what the topic of the day is, when it's going to be, so I can give you the updates there. Don't forget, this week's episode is sponsored by my new push-pull squat program. The link is down below for that, as well as the resources to all of the other books and equipment resources that I always recommend. That helps to support the channel. It's greatly appreciated that you check that stuff out. And I will talk to you folks next week. Till then, be fit and live free.